Danny Almagor, welcome to the World Happiness Week by the World Happiness Fest and the World Happiness Foundation. It's a pleasure having you here. We are going to frame this discussion around impact, and in this case, impact seen from a corporate point of view, from an investment point of view, and having you, this is like, is luxury in many ways, because if there is somebody in the world that knows about this, is you. So thank you so much, Danny.
Thank you, Luis.
So I'm
very excited to be here.
Yeah, thank you so much. So you are basically founder CEO of Small Giants. Can you tell us a bit more about what you do and the framework that you are building in order to make a sustainable impact?
Sure. Well, I mean, Small Giants, it's hard to even describe it because although we're sort of a business, really the way I describe it is often an idea. And Berry, my wife, who we started this together, she's the giant in our business, but she often describes it as an intention or as a feeling. And really, Small Giants is all about how do we use business and investing as a force for good, right? So that's it. We sort of looked around the world and we said that, you know, the huge lever that we have in trying to create change, social change, environmental change, bringing happiness to the world is in business. You know, we often think about it as the non-profit and government. You know, they're the two, the third sector and government are the two areas where we have, you know, we're able to pull to try and create change in our society. And business is this neutral middle player. And that's not true at all. I mean, business is the largest by far. You know, it's much more significant in size than any government as a whole. You know, nowadays we have businesses that even single businesses that are bigger than governments. There are, you know, half a dozen businesses today in the world that are larger than the Australian government, larger than the Australian economy even. So business is this enormous power, right, within our social structure, within our society, within our economy, of course. And we need to activate it. We need to activate it to create the outcomes that we want to create, which is, you know, well-being, happiness, a sustainable environment, a regenerative economy, a flourishing, you know, ecosystem, and, you know, happy and healthy humans.
So can we go deeper about the frameworks that you are using in order to have that sustainable impact? Where do you invest? And basically what we have here is many leaders at the corporate level that are thinking what else they can do to make a business a force for good. So what is your recommendation and your framework?
Sure. So I mean, we started, so Small Giants, think of it as probably more on the investment side. We invest in businesses, but we also do start businesses as well. So we are occasionally creating enterprises. From a business perspective, we really looked at something called B Corporation. I'm sure many of your listeners have heard of that, but if you haven't, it's essentially a group of businesses that have committed themselves to putting purpose first, to say, you know, we are here to try and make a difference in the world. Profit, of course, is important, but, you know, I always think of profit or money coming into a business like food in your body. You know, I don't live to eat. But if I don't eat, I can't survive. And that's a question around profit in business. Profit is essential. You know, it's not a bad word. It's not a bad term, right? But it's not the purpose of business. Anyone who sort of says, I'm in business just to make money, I think that's really sad. And that's not the intention in my mind of what business could and should be. So the first thing we do is look at what are the things we invest in, right? And they have to be businesses that have purpose at their core. From an investment perspective, of course, we ask the question, right, and then I'll sort of share the framework, but from an investor, we ask the question, well, what do we care about in the world? You know, what are our values? And then we say, like a value investor, we call ourselves a values investor. We align according to our values. And if we care about climate change and think that's really important, then we look across our investment portfolio and say, well, how are we addressing that issue? From our investments, not just our philanthropy. If we care about gender equality, then we look and we say, okay, let's have a look at our investments and try and determine, you know, how many of them are female-led, or have female representation in leadership or on the boards, right? If that's important to you, it is to us. So et cetera, et cetera. So you start asking yourself on those values, what are they? If it's homelessness, if it's refugees, like, well, then how are our investments affecting these issues? And oftentimes you find that they really are. If you're invested in property and property development, which we are, then affordable housing becomes a really important conversation, even in our property development business. So what we've done is we sort of looked at it from that perspective. Okay, we now know the kind of the concept, the criteria of businesses that we're looking for. And we now know the values that we, in terms of B Corps, like the types of businesses we look for, and we know the values that we have, the things that we're trying to change in the world. Like a good question to ask is, what type of world do we want to live in? What type of world do we want to leave our kids? It's a great way to start. So we answered that from an investment perspective. We set our values. And then we needed a framework to sort of say, well, there's a whole universe of things that we could do. And we looked at it from a few different perspectives, but essentially we came to a number of different categories or sectors that we felt could have a meaningful impact. And if you think about it in a simple way, think of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And we sort of looked along the bottom part and said, well, let's take some of the foundational things. We also aligned it to, there's a book called Drawdown, which was edited by Paul Hawken, talking about how do we draw down carbon to try and reverse global warming. And he also created sectors that are very similar to the ones that we come up with. So we felt very good that it sort of, it serves both the basic human needs, as Maslow sort of described, and also the environmental needs, as Paul Hawken sort of described in his book, Drawdown. So we came up with the idea of the built environment, where we live, energy, food and agriculture, what we eat. I mean, these are all fundamental things, right? The concept of circular economy, which is waste. How do we deal with waste? And then the last one, I should have done it like that. The last one itself, which I think is the thumb, is finance. Where does the flow of capital go? So we looked across these 5 different areas and said, well, how do we focus our investments and, sort of encouraging businesses in those? They're not the only 5. Of course, if your values are much deeper in health, then you could have health, education, transport, lots of other things. This is by no means a limit, sort of our 5 only ones. These are just the 5 we focus on. But when you look at it, we start thinking about, okay, what is the food system and what do we need? Are we able to find, regenerative agriculture investments? Are we able to find businesses that are trying to redefine how we engage with food? And you've got some really big ones. When I look around at Whole Foods as an alternative to the traditional supermarkets globally, and many others on a much smaller scale. If I mention them, they're beautiful, but you might not know about them. In fact, even one that I love is insect farming. So we invested in a company in Australia called Goterra that is looking at basically protein, animal protein coming from insects, which is, incredibly efficient with regards to, transfer. So take food waste, feed it to insects, and then those insects can then be put into our food system. So, feeding fish farms, so we don't have to trawl the bottom of the ocean to try and get fish food or other things. So you've got some really, really interesting concepts around that. And then you, of course, look at energy, and you've got renewable energy and solar farms and wind farms, but also energy efficiency products. So you've got all these things in all these different places that are serving what we need, which is, serving people and the planet, putting purpose first, but also huge growth industries, right? That are really offering opportunity for people not only to do well or to do good, but also to do really well financially. And then we can just go through each one of them. In the built environment, of course, housing, everything from sustainable housing to affordable housing, and everything in between. So you look at all those. And the last one, waste, again, I'll leave that to your imagination, recycling, etc. But the last one is finance. And the real question is, where are we, if money is energy, like we said, it was food in the body, if money is a form of energy, and that is the food for our economy, right, which it is today, whether you like it or not, and it's an amazing idea. People don't agree on God. People don't agree on political systems. You know, we have the most profound, you know, difference. We've got ISIS on one end, doesn't agree with much of the value system that we hold, but they still accept the US dollar, right? What's amazing here is money still transcends almost money is still a belief system, right? It's just a piece of paper, and if we don't believe it's real, then it wouldn't be real anymore. And you can see that with hyperinflation in some countries where the confidence in the money system, you know, the currency, disappears, and then it's worth nothing. So we believe in this stuff. This is the fuel. Our question on the last one, and this is, I guess, what I want to leave the listeners with, is where are we going to put that energy? You know, what type of food do we put in our bodies? And we talk a lot this week about wellness, about happiness, and we say it's the right food, right? It's not any food. You know, it's not like, oh, we've got a hunger problem, so just feed them rubbish, right? Or feed ourselves rubbish. You know, we have to have food, have enough, right? And make sure it's healthy, make sure it's the right food for us. And too much is also a problem. So if we look at the finance system, we start asking the question, right, of how much is enough? Like, where do we need to flow that capital? And where is good capital going? So my question would be, where is your pension fund? You know, when you're buying a new car or buying a t-shirt, when you're spending money, you're basically investing it, whether you're an investor at the highest level, you know, investing in shares or listed equities or private equity, or whether you're just going about your day, putting a little bit of pension away or putting money in a savings account in a bank, or even just spending it on your daily stuff. All of it is putting this energy back into the economy. It's you know, it's putting it in. And I think we really need to ask, where is our flow of finance? Are you buying from companies that are aligned with your values? Are you buying from companies that are women-led or minority-led or led by wonderful, you know, men like yourself? When we put our pension fund in, are we asking the question, is that money being used for gambling? Is it money being used for fossil fuels? Is it money being used to create things that we don't want? And that's at the essence of what we're trying to do. We're just trying to kickstart that through our investment system and offering people sort of an example of what can be done.
Well, it's really a structure in the right and in the good way. This is what I really love. It's so very clear how you align on values. Can we combine a bit the portfolio with trends? Where do you think the world is going with respect to trends, to social investment? And what is your advice right now? If somebody is thinking of making a major impact, where should they go? Where is the low-hanging fruit?
Yeah, it's great. I mean, the trend seems obviously in this direction, and for twofold. One is I think there is some consciousness rising in the world today. You know, climate change is, you know, in Australia, we had the worst fires in our history in 2020, not to mention, obviously, the global pandemic. But the fires themselves really woke us up to this idea. So you're getting a consciousness, an awakening for a lot of people that this stuff is important, that looking after our planet and looking after our own health is important. So it's funny because we talk about trends, and I know your background also is trends start with people, right? It's not like there's a trend doesn't sort of happen out there. It happens because humans decide we want to go in a different direction. And I'm watching that happen in front of my eyes, you know, everything from, you know, from the consumers. We have a green building company, and, you know, we have more houses to build than we can build. You know, we just have a long line of people saying we really want to build green. We want to build sustainably. So there's this massive trend just in the grassroots, right, that we can try and start tapping into and taking advantage of with regards to having this impact. But also at the top levels, at the leaders that we're talking about here, even Larry Fink from BlackRock, you know, is coming out with these unbelievable letters that he writes each year and starting to say, actually, you know, climate risk is investment risk. So we're starting to see this integration, not to mention so many, wise thinkers from academia and the, in the business world, people like Paul Polman from Unilever, again, integrating this idea of human well-being and wellness to investment well-being and wellness, to business well-being and wellness. So I see the trend both at the grassroots, this huge uprising or increasing consciousness around both our inner lives, our personal lives, and the planet, and at the top levels. So you sort of look at that, that's like, for strategic, there's a pincer move, you come from both angles. So if we've got the leadership seeing it and we've got the grassroots seeing it, this is just a matter of time. And you can see that in electric cars, that are taking over the world, and now, companies and countries and cities like London and Volkswagen, you name it, are all now saying, actually, we see this trend, we're on it. So the question is, where are we going to be on that trend? If you're in a surfboard on the water, you sort of wait. If you wait too long, you miss the wave, right? And it's not bad because this wave is a beautiful wave. You just won't ride it. So, get in the front of that wave because this is where it's happening.
I love the analogy. And for those who surf, they really get it. So with that in mind, we are discussing this week how to mitigate suffering because there is quite a lot of suffering going on in the world. And an impact investment definitely is going to help. But do you see a shift in the economic paradigm going forward? Of course, money is energy. Of course, this is going to be part of the system. But do you see anything going on from a macro political and macroeconomic level that we should be looking at?
That's a wonderful question. I wish we had more time because it's such a deep conversation. I do think there's going to be a shift. You talk about Happytalism, which I just love that name. And I think the capitalist system, and it's not capitalism. I think we get attached to words and sort of, if it's not capitalism, then it must be something else. These are all evolutions. These are all iterations of ideas, where we sort of say that version is not working for us. So we either need to adapt that version and sort of say, capitalism has worked really well to take a whole lot of people out of poverty, but it's also created a massive divide, at least modern capitalism, neoliberalism, a massive divide between rich and poor, that you've got, sort of 8 people at the top that have more wealth than the bottom 3.5 billion. Right? So that disparity of wealth cannot continue. And there's lots of research around that. There's a book called The Spirit Level that talks about where when the disparity gets too great, you just see all these health indicators like crime and anxiety and depression and all these things start increasing. So we know that to hold well-being, we have to create a system that is more just and fair. And I think that whether that's a redesign of capitalism or whether that's a new system altogether, I'm not sure. They're big conversations, but I think like anything, what we need to have small steps to get there. Like in any case, revolution, I'm not interested in World War III to get us to what the next version is. I'd much rather us be able to do it together, right, in some kind of iterative process rather than some massive sort of, a catastrophic event that forces us there. And that's what we're talking about. We're going to move one way or the other. Like it's unsustainable. We're using almost 2 planets worth of resources and we only have 1 planet to use. So we're going to hit that. In my mind, it's a bit like, the Prius, when Toyota brought out the Prius. And I remember, people said, but it's, it's still not perfect. It's still not all electric. And you're like, no, but it's a bridge, right? And I think what we're talking about here are bridges to this next economy. And of course, there's no perfect economy. When we get to the next economy, then we'll have to look at that and say, okay, well, what's not working in that one, in that version, right? And what's the bridge to the next? And see if that, I think it was Martin Luther King, the arc of time bends towards justice, or the arc of the universe. And that's the idea, but we've got to walk on that path. So for me, impact investing is not the perfect answer, and you know, better business as a force for good is not the perfect answer, but it is a step towards there. It opens up new ideas. And for me, can businesses treat their staff in a way that honors them for the gifts that each human brings to this world, you know? And if we start doing that, maybe we'll see a lot of these issues that we have, you know, from disparity, you know, instead of paying a CEO, you know, 200 times what the lowest staff member is worth, which effectively on a financial basis is saying this person is that much more valuable. You know, to how do we treat women in the workplace, you know, or maternity leave when, you know, women leave the workplace to have babies, and how do they come back? How do we try and bring in people with disadvantage, you know, whether they're coming from socioeconomic classes or with physical disadvantages. So business has a profound opportunity to be part of that bridge to this next economy. And if we don't do that, we'll you know, like, what is it? You know, you look at France and Russia and every other place that we didn't take care of the people, and the people revolted. And from a business perspective, we need to start seeing ourselves in the responsible place that we are.
I love it. And we know, and we know this together, that we cannot be indifferent. Indifference is really, really bad for this world. So I really appreciate all what you are doing, being part of the advisory board at the World Happiness Foundation. And as you know, we are trying to be one bridge into new paradigms and into old paradigms, into any dialogue that can happen. So I really appreciate that. One last question, short question, and probably short answer. I mean, it's early today in Australia, but imagine that it's tomorrow. You wake up. What is your mind? What do you do first? I mean, in one single day, you have to say, okay, today I'm gonna be only doing one thing. What do you do?
What do I do? On a daily basis, or in my vision of the great world? I think we just wake up, take a moment to center yourself, look out the window and be grateful for what we do have. Start off with a positive attitude, and then wherever you are, just spread love. Like, spread love.
Okay, we get it. And this love is going to everybody. This is fantastic. As you know, this is last day of this World Happiness Week. It's been an amazing week. And today is all focused on impact. We learned so much from work, health, education, technology, self, planet. Today is a big day because we have to wrap up and we have to start making meaningful solutions. So what you're bringing as insights is just really, really useful and it's going to be useful for so many people. Thank you so much, Danny.
Thanks, Luis. It's just beautiful to be able to do it together.
Thank you.
Bye.